Well, as folks are trickling in here, I'm just pushing the last few buttons to make sure we get broadcast to all the good places. And recording. Record, please. Oh, of course. Let's see here. Usually it interrupts me to say that it's recording. So I want to wait a minute until it says that. So thank you all for your patience as I push all these buttons here. And it looks like we're going. So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on our live virtual event with local authors Craig Lancaster and Alan Morris Jones. I'm your host, Jessica, the event coordinator here at Country Bookshelf on the ancestral unceded land of the Apsalaki Crow, Salish Kootenai, Cheyenne, Shoshone Bannock, and Achaemenid people. We are very excited tonight to be chatting about And It Will Be a Beautiful Life. Be sure to sign up for our newsletter to stay up to date on all the events going on at Country Bookshelf and follow us on Eventbrite so you can register for all of them right when they appear. Before we get to our speakers this evening, I do want to point out a few things about our virtual space. If you haven't yet purchased your copy with your registration, you can do that at the link that I'll be posting in the chat here momentarily. We are recording tonight's event, so if you have to duck out early to get dinner on the table or whatever, please visit us at Country Bookshelf YouTube channel to watch that again. If you have questions for Craig and Alan, you can submit them at any time by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can also drop them in the chat here, and we'll get to them as time allows. If you run into any tech issues along the way, it's usually easiest to exit and re-enter. If that doesn't work, do look for that live stream on YouTube that I mentioned. You can usually pick it up there. And if you're having trouble with sound, headphones are often the easiest fix for that. And I do, of course, want to remind everyone that this is a shared creative space that we wish to remain safe for everyone that's joined us today. So offensive or inappropriate comments will, of course, see the user dismissed from the space. So without further ado, Craig Lancaster is joining us from Billings, and Alan, of course, at home here in Bozeman. But Craig was mentioning it's your 9th book, And It Will Be a Beautiful Life. You may be familiar with Edward and the Chronicles of Edward. So we are very excited to hear more from you and see what you've got coming up. So without further ado, I think I'm going to turn it over to you guys, and I'll get those links in the chat, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Well, hi, Jessica. Hi, Alan. It's good to be with you.
Great to see you, Craig.
Yeah. What
Congratulations
live, huh? You in Bozeman, me in Billings. Here we are.
It's this is the first one of these I've done during the whole COVID. So this is a new experience for me. But it's an occasion, man. Congratulations on a fantastic book. We'll get that out of the way first. It's like, damn, these things keep getting better.
Oh, well, I appreciate you saying that. I'm really proud and happy about this one. It's to answer Jessica's questions, my 10th book is my 9th solo, and it's been a long layoff. As long a layoff as I've had since the first one was published, and so it's nice to be back. It's a story that cracked me open.
So the pre-talk before we started recording, we were chatting a little bit, and you mentioned that they keep getting a little bit harder as you go along.
Sure.
So 9 books into it, 10 books into it, this is ground that I haven't seen yet, so I don't have this experience. But what has 9 or 10 books in? What's that taught you as you've gone along?
It's taught me mostly to be quiet and listen to what the idea is saying and when it wants to come out. And I don't freak out quite so much when one wants to lay down and rest a little bit. I used to think it was like being on the Iditarod Trail and your team had quit on you, and sometimes really what it needs is just to sit down for a while and have you circle back around to it. And so, having a full life is super important to actually, birthing a book at some point, just because, I have other things I can go and do. And this book sat for a good long while. And when I picked it up again, it was time to pick it up and finish it. And I'm not sure I listened, if that message was coming through to me at all 6 or 7 years ago, I'm not sure I was listening to it. I was just, you sit down and you start working and you work until you're done, and that's that. So.
Well, the great thing about writing fiction is that all those digressions, all those side paths you take in the meantime, all that, it's not wasted. You'll find a way to use it somehow. Yeah. The only really way you can waste time is playing video games.
Yeah,
which has a lot to recommend it sometimes.
Well, I scored 20 under on Wii Golf. That was not wasted time. That right there. But this book, with this one, several years ago, mostly out of boredom, I started doing some traveling pipeline inspection, and it was, it's quiet work, it's solitary work, and that was a wonderful time inside my own head, as scary as that might be sometimes. And it led directly to, who this character is, who's also a traveling pipeline worker. But you're absolutely right. That time you spend thinking about it is every bit as important, I've found, as the time you actually spend in the turret, working your fingers down to the bone to try to get it written out. I don't see how the second thing can happen without the first. So
you bet.
Yeah.
So do you care to describe the novel for folks that may not read it or folks that might be interested?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So it centers on this fella named Max Wendt, W-E-N-D-T. And Max has been doing this traveling pipeline work for a long time. And as the book opens, he's come to realize that the great world has spun on without him. And like he's literally been gone. And his wife has gone on and his daughter has grown up. And and the book opens in a place where he has to start reconciling those things. And it's funny, when I joined up with my current publisher, and I was talking to him about my books, he wanted to find out, so what kind of stories do you write? And he knew, because there's a body of work there, but he quickly fixated on the whole crossroads thing. Start with a character at crossroads. And I don't think, as I think about it, I'm not sure that's terribly notable. I mean, that's a lot of good books start at a crossroads because it's where the action starts rising. But it had never been put to me quite that way before. And then I realized, thinking back, that that's exactly what it is, And I always just thought it was more the fiction thing of start the book as close to the end of the book as you can, So
characters revealed in crisis.
Right. Yeah. pressure-filled moments, Yeah, it's the along with, at least for the kind of books I write, along with memory and imagination, that's it. Let's take everything that you hold near and dear and everything that you thought you could count on, and let's throw that stuff up in the air and see what sticks when it comes down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have to point out or comment on. I don't know if this question can go anywhere really, but the character's name Max Went, in the context of the story, had a Dickensian flair to it. I don't know if you meant to do the signifier thing with the name, but it tickled me the more I got into it.
It tickles him too. Yeah. I did not, with so many things, I did not plan that out. I did not think, well, I can have some fun with this name. But all of those things to me are fairly invisible when you're in it. I almost think you have to finish a book to know what in the world it's about. For me anyway, I couldn't imagine approaching something and saying, for instance, I want to write a book that peels back the skin on 2016 to 2020. What would be much more likely is that I would just write a story and then I would find out at the end everything I think about the time period in question. And it seems a much more organic way of doing it to me. So,
did you know where the book was going? Did you write your ending before you got there?
I often do, but I didn't this one. In fact, I had different ideas. And that was the scary part of, what we often refer to as the murky middle, where I can get it started, I can get, I can build up a little speed, and, I'm going to get somewhere in the middle of this book, and am I going to find my way out to, the descending action and all of that. And a lot of people get lost in there. I've certainly gotten lost in there. I've had stories where, what am I doing? What am I doing now? And this one, once I picked it up again and finished it, it kept pulsing toward the end, but I wasn't entirely sure what that end was going to be. But there have been books where I knew the last line of the book and I just had to figure out how to get there.
Right. Yeah.
Almost scarier, in its way, because you've got this last line that you're in love with, but you don't want to be too hands-on about the getting there. You don't want to control too much, or or you find going off in a new direction. You're like, no, I got to steer it back to this line that I love so much. So it's a strange thing.
And the title, does that come early or does that come late? It's a great title.
The title was very hard to come up with for the longest time. And people who read Montana Quarterly might remember this. For the longest time, it was called Time Period, Speed Period, Distance Period, which are the three elements of liquid dynamics through pipelines. If you're tracking a tool from one pumping station to another, and you're wanting to stay fixated on that tool, the three things you need to know are: how long has it been in the flow, what speed is it traveling at, and how much farther does it have to go. And if you can figure those, if you have two of those three numbers, you can fixate on location. So, and that to me seemed thematic of the book. And I published a short story in Montana Quarterly a year or so ago that was a little bit of this book and titled it Time, Speed, and Distance, because that all seemed to work. And then my publisher said, I love you, man, but I don't love this title, and so I waited. I figured, okay, well, maybe something will reveal itself to me in the writing, and that's what it ended up being. Somebody in the book says that, and it seemed to be, it seemed to encapsulate what was going on with that character and what was going on with Max. And I love the, and you can see on, my bookshelf, I've got Chicago Manual Style here. So I love this verb tense thing. I don't know if anybody else notices it, but I did. I love how it's, future perfect. It's not past tense. It's not, present perfect. I contrast it with the great, Jimmy Stewart movie, It's a Wonderful Life, and that movie purported to say that regardless of what you're seeing, George Bailey, it's, your life is wonderful. This says it will be right now. And I sort of appreciate that.
Well, it's kind of reassuring too, when you read the book and you read everything that Max is going through, the bottom's kind of dropping out. It's like, as the reader, you're invested in the character and you want to be reassured that things are going to be okay. I found that as I was reading, it's like, well, things are pretty bad for him right now, but it's going to be okay. It says so on the cover of the book.
Yeah, right. There's got to be redemption there. Yeah. So
it's you get attached to a title. You have your working title and you're working your way through the book, and you lose sight of whether it's actually a good title or not. For Sweeney on the Rocks, that the crime novel I published, I had a working title. I had this idea that I would do the John D. MacDonald thing, where I would do a series of books with a thematic series of titles, stringing them all together. And I was going to do dances, so it was going to be the Razor Blade Tango, right, or the Blood Red Rumba, I think, or something like this. And I still think it's kind of a good idea, but my publisher had a much better idea. So that title came from him as well.
Well, I'm curious about, just because I love this book so much, A Bloom of Bones, because it's, I don't want to give anything about it away. If you haven't read the book, you should, break all speed laws, getting place where you can get it and read it. But if you do read the book, it's hard to imagine it carrying any other title but that. Were you always there? Were you always with that, or?
I no. It went that book went through several titles, and at this point, I'd be hard pressed to really dredge up what they were at this point. But it took me a while. The main character is a poet, and it took me a while to settle on. I wrote different versions of the character where he did different things, and it took me a while to settle on poetry as kind of his oeuvre. Once I did that, then I thought, well, the title of the book needs to kind of echo that a little bit. And so I like the alliteration, and I like the way it turns it on its head a little bit. It's not a bloom in a rose garden; it's a bloom of bones.
Yeah. I think one of the things that I really appreciate that book was the poetry, the external texts that that push it along, because I do that too, and I always love to see someone do it well, because it is a little bit of a leap of faith, isn't it, to pull out of the narrative and say, okay, here's this other thing, and
right.
And ask the reader to absorb that and incorporate it into the main of what you're telling.
Yeah, I think it is a little bit of a risk, and it was a little presumptuous on my part as well. I think because within the context of the book, within the world of the book, the character is supposed to be this highly regarded poet.
Yeah,
and so I'm shoving my own poetry out there and calling it great, which is, I was hesitant about that, but what the hell? It's fiction.
It's your book.
It's my book. I can do what I want.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad you liked it. Thank you.
Oh yeah. I put it in so many hands.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So there's a thing we've talked about the book, which everybody needs to go read. It Will Be a Beautiful Life. But it occurs to me, you and I have known each other for a long time.
Yeah.
But we've never really sat down and gotten to know each other.
Right.
I don't know that we've ever had dinner, for instance.
We've talked about it. Yeah.
We've talked about it, but we've never actually gotten there.
Right.
So I've never had the chance to actually get to know Craig Lancaster. So
Okay.
I'm going to do a thing. I'm going to take a page from Stephen Colbert.
Okay.
He does this thing called the Colbert Questionnaire, where he rattles off these seemingly inane questions.
Okay.
And then
sure.
at the end of it, maybe you have a better sense for who the guy is. So I'm not Stephen Colbert, but nevertheless, I thought I would give you some questions. It might be entertaining. You never know. See what comes.
Yeah,
out.
let's give it a whirl.
So number one, Craig Lancaster. What's your most embarrassing fanboy moment when you met a writer you admired?
Oh, gosh. I think that I would have to say, just because of the venue, was at the Montana Festival of the Book several years ago, and Robert Wrigley, the poet, was one of the featured readers at the Wilma, and he did a poem called American Fear, which, God, go read this poem. And he did it. It's one of the reasons I love going to poetry readings, even though, you were talking about, being, positioning yourself as a poet in this book. I'm, whatever degree of poet you are, I am way worse. But I love going to poetry readings because they're part performance. And Wrigley not only had a great poem, he performed it in a way that was just spellbinding. And so when I met him later on, it was either at another Montana Festival of the Book or later at that one, I can't remember, but I burbled kind of stupidly in his direction, and he's always been nice about it, but I was pretty ridiculous. And it was because I didn't have anything original to say to him, except, oh God, I love that poem so much. Oh God, which I don't know. I wouldn't dare, say how he took it. He was very gracious, which, given how undignified I was, I appreciated.
You're in the movie theater with $20 after buying your ticket. What do you get after popcorn? What's your movie theater snack?
Well, you got to have something to drink, but if I've got $20, even at theater prices, I can afford the drink and some milk duds.
Milk duds.
Yeah, because I need to irritate everybody around me by going. Yeah. So. Yeah.
I'm kind of a Raisin Nuts guy.
Yeah.
It's kind of in the same ballpark.
Yeah. Something chewy and yummy.
Yeah. The job, other than chasing a pig, that's best served you as a writer.
Probably a journalist, which I still am, and because whether you're an editor, which is mostly what I've done, or a reporter, which I have done some, there's no excuses about ducking the work. You can't say, not feeling it today. You can't say, oh, well, maybe I'll go mow the yard instead, or what, the work is there. You have to do the work, and you close the book on the night and you move on. And there's a wonderful ethic about that. And really, if you embrace that, like, today's a work day and I'm going to work. If you write fiction, you get the benefit that a journalist almost never gets. And that is, even if it sucks, you can go back and, work on it again, as journalism, certainly daily journalism, you got one shot. I've written some journalism that I'm proud of, but I've also written some, just real crap that I was trying my best, but I just, either because the story wasn't cooperating or I just wasn't finding the groove I wanted, and deadlines coming and you don't have the luxury. So I always view it in, it helps shape me terms, I'm very good at sitting down and doing the work. And I think it's that background.
You share that ethic with some very, very famous, very productive writers. I mean, from Mark Twain on up to John D. MacDonald, whom I mentioned.
Right.
A lot of guys started out in journalism and then brought that work ethic to their fiction.
Yeah, it's a great training ground. I mean, and you quickly find out whether you can do it or not. So.
Question number 4: the Beatles or the Rolling Stones?
Oh, the Beatles all day long. I do love the Stones, but that love came to me probably after age 18 when I really got what it was about. But since all of our, that musical lifeblood that pumps through us, it's my stepdad. It's my stepdad playing the original Beatles LPs for me when I was 5 years old, and me immediately fixating on Paul. Like, that's my favorite. And then I grew into my appreciation for the other three. But yeah, it's not even close. It's not even close.
Favorite Beatles album?
Ooh, Rubber Soul.
Rubber Soul.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, top to bottom. Yeah.
I want to say White Album, but that's almost too much. Rubber Soul is nice and condensed.
I love the White. I mean, I love everything for what it is. This is sort of how I appreciate art. I've always been a adherent of what Roger Ebert said, and I might botch this quote, but he basically said, it's not what it is, it's how it goes about being what it wants to be. That's how you ought to rate art. And so I love the White Album. They were not very cohesive at that point. They kind of coming in and cutting their own parts. So it's interesting in that way, because you certainly see a lot of what George was going to do later, because he finally had the shackles off a little bit. But the four of them just being tight, I gotta go Rubber Soul.
Number 5, best catch from an editor in your work. Or limited to this most recent book. Is there something that that's a big question.
Limited to this
no
book?
Worries.
There were a couple of places. This wasn't catch the way a copy editor would think of it. Like, you had the wrong weather in there. It was more thematic. There are a couple of spots where I wasn't quite entirely empathetic with Max in that moment, and he spotted them and was like, you should take another run at this because it doesn't feel like him. And sure enough, given the opportunity to step back and reconsider it,
that's so valuable when you get that. Feedback.
It's way more valuable to me than repairing my sentences. I mean, sometimes my sentences need repairing, but over the course of a number of rewrites, I will get to most of that. It's you've got a little bit of a dissonant chord here. That's where I really appreciate the backup.
Number 6, who plays the lead in the Hollywood movie of It Will Be a Deal?
Oh man. So he's got to be. That's a really tough one, because it can't be like classically good looking, because I don't think Max is. So who's a nice, rugged, but soft? I don't know. I mean, I think you've stumped me.
You can take a
Honestly,
mulligan.
yeah, I think you've stumped me. I really,
Yeah.
Max looks a certain way to me, but I'm not
Yeah.
I'm not seeing the comp.
Well, and it's dangerous because you also don't want to put that person in the head of the reader too.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I mean, if I want to sell tickets, it's like let's take Clooney out back and add 70 pounds and knock him around a little bit. So, he's not quite so beautiful, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Question number 7, Glacier or Yellowstone?
Okay. So here's where I have to admit how limited I am in Montana in certain ways. I have not been to Glacier since I was a little boy. I've lived here almost 15 years and I haven't made the trip up there, and I need to. So Yellowstone wins on a technicality, but I reserve the right to call you up, and I'll do it at like 11 p.m. So for maximum effect. And I'll say, Alan, I was wrong. It's Glacier. It's got to be Glacier all day long. But
go in October.
Okay.
At this point.
All right. Excellent.
Mac or PC?
Okay. Well, I'm gonna give you an answer here that's gonna kind of wreck some of my credibility, because one of my side gigs is I'm the design editor of Montana Quarterly, which requires some fluency with images and colors and fontography and all that. But I got nothing but PCs in this house.
Is that right?
Yeah. And it's because I do so many other different things that PC is much more, to me at least. My wife would give you a different, there she is. My wife would give you a different answer, but they're so utilitarian for me that I've just always found PC. Plus, when they inevitably bust, they're a lot cheaper to replace. So
that's true.
Yeah.
Question number 9. If you opened your own Montana bar, what would you call it? Craig Saloon.
The Big Galoot.
Love it.
It'll work, Come on down to the Galoot.
I'll meet you at the Galoot.
I'll meet you at the Galoot. We'll hang out in the belly. Yeah.
Along the same lines, if you could have a beer with one of your own characters, which one would it be?
I think I would like to, just because my head is so in it, I think it would either be Max or Charles Foster Danforth, who is Max's friend in this book.
Yeah.
Just because he's an interesting cat, I think I would enjoy a beer with that guy. He'd probably have yeah.
It's kind of hard to think that way as the writer, I think in some ways that if you do your job, the characters are more real to the reader than they are to the writer, in some ways.
I think that's yeah. Well, I always love the aspect of writing where, so you push, as the writer, you push across these people and you give them enough wiggle room that whoever's receiving them can sort of apply their own ideas about who they are, what they're like, whether they want to hang out with them or not, And I think that's a young writer. For me, that was a young writer mistake, is trying to own too much of the details when really I should just let them go and let people impose their own thoughts.
Question number 11, outlines, yes or no?
Negatory, good buddy. Don't.
No.
Yeah, and it burns me a little bit, because I'll do things as they occur to me or for expediency's sake, so I have had instances where, an uncle is dead in chapter 3 because it suits the story that they talk about old dead Uncle Albert. There's a little nod to McCartney. And then, you figure out in chapter 19 that, Albert needs to come walking down the street and he's dead. So, you got to go kill another. When you go back on the rewrite, you've got to kill somebody else there so Albert can actually be realized. And that kind of thing happens, but I would much rather just sort of write from the seat of my pants. It's more fun. It's more fun for me. So,
yeah, I've never had much luck with outlines. It always ends up kind of stifling the work in a way.
Yeah. I know people who thrive with them, but a lot of those people are writing in durable genres where, being able to get through it is at least part of the art that they're pulling off. And for me, it's this book will take however long this book takes, and okay with the uncertainty of that.
Plain cinnamon raisin or the works?
Oh, on the bagel, it's just plain bagel. Yeah,
plain bagel.
Probably with butter. If I'm feeling jazzy, I'll take it with egg and sausage, most of it. But yeah, my wife taught me that. My wife is from Long Island, and just plain bagel with butter. You don't
plain with maybe a schmear.
Maybe a schmear, but she's not a schmear person. Yeah.
So you've moved around a lot. What's the one item that keeps following you from move to move that you should probably throw away?
Just my own brokenness. I did realize I moved a lot in my early journalism career, and I've actually written about this, that when it was time to move on was usually when I got bored with a job or got bored with the little paper that I was at. And so I'd move to another paper that paid a little better and had a little more responsibility for me. And usually where those things, there was always a realization of, I brought me to this. And so, the things that I've not figured out about myself or haven't dealt with are the common denominators. So I've brought me and my growth and, or my need to grow, as it may be. And then for a while there was an aluminum mixing bowl that seemed to follow me. It followed me from, Texarkana to Anchorage, so.
Yeah. Finally, question number 14,
right.
Publishing advice to young writers.
Oh God, publishing advice. It's so, and I'd be curious whether you agree, disagree with this. Publishing advice and writing advice are like two completely different worlds that, are governed by the same moon, and the publishing advice is, I think, is to keep your options as open as you feel like they can be once publishing becomes a reality for you. Some of the writers I know who have the most regrets are ones who got bound up in 2 and 3 book deals and, learned some things in book 1 that they were sort of handcuffed on books 2 and 3. And so I think it comes to a kind of it's a parallel with Bet on Yourself, which is, gosh, when I got my first publishing contract in 2009, there were so many things I couldn't have foreseen. I happily signed what was at the time sort of an industry standard contract. There's no reason for me to look askance at it. There, is a perfectly fine publisher who I have a good relationship with to this day. but it did lock me into some things that not future books so much as you know what that book makes for me now. And there's a lot of different ways to go, and as and you've got to make a decision with each one about what you want to do, and so
it's contract negotiation is an art form in and of itself. You can push back on certain elements, and certain elements you can't, and where you push and where you don't is kind of life experience, I think.
Well, it reminds me
of, or you pay a good attorney to take it.
Yeah, it reminds me of, and I see that Jessica's here, but it reminds me of when I was a manager at newspapers and I was hiring people, and one of the things that they could negotiate with me about was how much vacation time they get. And some people were upset to find out later on that, some future employee had gotten 4 weeks where they had gotten 3, and, and come to me. And I'm like, we could have talked about that. Well, why didn't you tell me? So, well, if I tell you that we can talk about that, then, there's be much of a discussion, and it sucks. It really does, and I think a lot of writers are probably prepared for the artistic end of it, not so much the business end of it, which is the value of a good agent. And thank God.
That's right.
Yeah. So.
Did you have an agent when you made your first contract? Or
no.
Was that a lesson you learned later?
No, I had an agent friend who looked at it and said, you're not being taken advantage of. So that was, like I said, I don't have any regrets. I just, if the question is advice, my advice is, keep your avenues as open as you can as you go forward. So.
Wonderful. Well, we do have a question from the audience.
Okay.
And I might use this opportunity to also re-prompt our audience. If you have a question for Craig or Alan, you can leave that at the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen or drop it in the chat. But Amy has sort of a double-pronged question. What amount of time is a good long time with regard to your writing your book, and what parts came first and then what followed after you picked it back up again?
So I'm trying to remember how long it sat. I started the book when we were living in Maine, which was mid 2018 until mid 2020. But I set it down fairly early, probably about 28,000 words into a 96,000 word book. So I would say I set it down for a year and a half easy of that 2-year period. And then when I picked it up again was after we moved back to Billings, and it went very fast after that. And I work kind of linear. I don't work, like today I'm working here and tomorrow I'm working there. I work wherever it is that I happen to be in the book. So, so that part was linear, but yeah, it was just a matter of rereading the first 25 to 28,000 words and saying, okay, all right, I know where this is going now. And I needed that year and a half. That's the way I look at it. It wasn't fallow. I needed to do that. So.
Have there been any other books that you took that kind of chunk of time to digest and percolate and all those
not that much time. The third Edward book came in 2 chunks, which was funny because the first 2 were once I had gotten my head around the character, the first 2 were such quick writes, and the third one I wrote a little and set it down, and I think it was more how busy I was and less that the story wasn't speaking to me.
You could say it unspooled.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. So, what do you?
Always looking to play with
what's your hour marketing rate?
Excellent. Well, I'm going to speak a little slowly for just a second to see if any of our other audience members want to chime in. But while I do that, question for both of you, very selfish question. What are you reading these days?
I'll let Alan go first.
So there's a pandemic nonfiction from I might get the name wrong. Very famous Michael, help me out, bookseller. The Premonition by Michael. He wrote The Big Short.
Michael Lewis.
Michael Lewis, thank you. Yeah. Really, really good writer. I admire that guy. Anyway, great book. It's a little disheartening. I have to read it in small chunks, but really, really good. He's a fantastic writer. I'm also reading some YA fiction. Our 10-year-old little boy is kind of reading above his grade level, so he's reading some older books. But I feel like before I turn him loose on a young adult novel, I really should read it myself. So I've actually been having a lot of fun reading young adult fiction.
It's a good time. What's he been the most excited about?
It's really funny. It's his favorite book is the one he just finished. It's like, God, this is so good. I love it. But he read The Hunger Games, which is maybe just a little bit old, but he really loved it. And then he's reading this series. The first book is Scythe, I think. And he's loving those. So
good.
Yeah. It's fun to watch. It's fun to watch somebody come alive to books.
Yeah.
What about you, Lancaster?
I am in small bites. I am reading Savage West, the biography of Thomas Savage by Alan Welsey. He used to teach at Montana Western, and both because I'm fascinated by Savage in a state where, we really do revere writers. Savage might be as good as we've ever had, and he's not nearly as well known as he ought to be. I always want to push him onto, any top 10 list of the best Montana writers who've ever lived. And part of that is because Sue Hart, the great English professor at MSU Billings, was such a champion of his. And it's because of her enthusiasm for Savage that Weltzine really started digging into him. Weltzine lives in Dillon, and which is
I didn't know that history. That's interesting.
Yeah, and so having, I went to a Helena Book Festival panel before I was ever published. So this would have been like 2008 or 2009. And Weltzine was talking about Savage, and he had me. And the Riverbend Publishing had just released one of his old Montana novels, and yeah, he's exquisite. He is so freaking good. It's unbelievable. And so learning about the man behind that is, and I'm savoring it. Alan writes in a very absorbing way, but you can't be distracted by anything else. You have to climb in there with what he's telling you. And so I grab little bits and pieces, and I'm gonna save it like a candy bar, where I just,
that's awesome.
Well, yeah. So
that's a great recommendation.
Scott is curious if you envision a sequel for And It Will Be a Beautiful Life in the future.
That is interesting because, without giving anything away, I would say Max ends up in a place where he could definitely have more to say. If I assess my idea management system, which is basically just scattered thoughts in my head. I'm not sure where that fits in, but I would never say never because I've said never before and I've been wrong. So, and Scott, by the way, I went to high school with him. It's good to see you here, man. So.
And then Elisa is stirring the pot a little. Alan, what is your favorite book of Craig's? And Craig, what is your favorite book of Alan's? I don't know if we already covered this earlier, but.
I'm a big fan of Julep Street. That's maybe one of the darker books Craig's written. It would be neck and neck between that one and this one. I truly did really enjoy this book. But having said that, Edward is a great character. You have to talk about Edward. You know. So.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Especially appreciate the kind words for Julep Street because it's the ugly stepchild of the group. You know, it just. But I love all those books. You know, but that's one that. Not too many people would pipe up with that answer. So as a guy whose favorite Steinbeck is The Wayward Bus, I really appreciate, you know, looking at a stack of things and going with the answer that isn't obvious. My favorite of Alan's, because he's so wide ranging, it's hard to zoom down to one. The fiction. I run out of words to say the way I was moved by A Bloom of Bones. I mean, it's such a fantastic book from the standpoint of literature and from setting a hook fast and getting somebody in. Like, you can't not be involved in that book from page one because of where it starts. And then that's a blatant tease for people who need to read this book. But, you know, I mean, it was one of those books that a lot of times when I read things that I'm envious of, I get sick to my stomach because I think, oh God, I could never possibly write anything that good. I did feel that way. I felt the emotion of I probably could never write something this good, but I wasn't sick to my stomach because it's such a beautiful book that, you know, I was nothing but thankful that A, I was reading it, and B, that I know the guy who wrote it. And I've quite deliberately not tried to pump you for like do that and where did that idea come from, because it's such, and I know I'm going on effusively kind of like I did to Robert Wrigley, but it's this beautiful thing, and I don't want to know how he did it. I'm just glad he did, you know. So
you're way too kind, Craig. Thank you.
Well, yeah.
Well, you can find all of those books, including And It Will Be a Beautiful Life, at the link I just dropped in the chat. If you didn't already purchase your copy with your registration, those will be available for pickup tomorrow morning. And they will also, if you chose shipping, those will get shipped out tomorrow morning as well. But I want to say thank you so much to Craig and Alan for joining us this evening, and to all of our viewers for your great questions and comments, as we all maybe head off to the Great Dilute for a wonderful aperitif.
Yeah.
This has been a lot of fun. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you, Alan, for doing it. I'm so glad you could.
It was a ball. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Bye. Okay.